Welcome everyone to the September 2024 meeting of the Memphis Astronomical Society. We've got a great program for you guys tonight. Worked pretty hard on this one, so I think you're going to get your money's worth. So we've got a lot of material covered, and I'll basically start off the first half of the presentation. We've got Brent, one of our Astro Ninjas. He's going to be following me, so nobody go nowhere. We got a lot of material to cover. So first of all, welcome back after a brief hiatus. Hey, Bradley. Hello. Welcome. You guys take a seat anywhere. I see you brought your own. Excellent. Hope all is well. A few preliminaries before we get started here. Of course, we're the Memphis Astronomical Society, nonprofit public service organization promoting interest in education and astronomy and related sciences. And of course, the best way to learn about us is on our website. You can find us on Facebook. I haven't updated the slide yet for the Twitter thing. And of course, we're on YouTube. So if you're seeing us for the first time out there in internet land, welcome. You do not have to be in Memphis, Tennessee to be a part of our organization. You can be in Scotland where it rains 240 days out of the year. And if you love astronomy, we're glad that you're tuning in. We hope that you'll get a lot of value out of tonight's meeting, and you're welcome to join us anytime. So this truly is a global effort. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so. Now, if you're not on our email list, or if you'd like to join our organization, all you got to do is scan that QR code right there. So, of course, if you're here tonight in person, we've got the same QR code out front on our banner. So this is the best way that you can contribute to our society. Take a picture of this QR code. Next time you're out and about, you're talking to people who may be interested in astronomy, all you don't do is you show them that QR code. They can scan it, and you can either join our email list, or if they want to join as a member, they can do that. So, and of course, if you're watching online, there it is. So the other way you can do it is actually go to our website and just click the join button. And again, you can either subscribe to our email list. We send updates out about once a week. And then, of course, you can also join as a member. Dirt cheap, 25 bucks a year. Go to Burger King. Last week, kids were hungry. Haven't been to Burger King in about 20 years. They wanted a Whopper. And of course, you got two kids, whatever one gets, the other one's got to get. So we get the Whopper, and then they want the strawberry shake. Might as well make it a meal. True story. 2 Whopper meals with vanilla shakes. 27 bucks.
Oh my gosh.
$27. So for less than that, you can join our organization for an entire year, and you get access to all the benefits of being a member. So anyway, just want to point that out. Won't be going back to, well, maybe I will. Anyway. Calendar events. Okay, we got a busy month coming up. We're getting into the fall now. We got a lot of events coming up. So this weekend, the 13th and the 14th, is International Observe the Moon Night. And we got a couple of different events planned. So we're actually going to be downtown on Friday the 13th. How ominous is that? Beale Street Landing. And we've got a couple of us are going to be out there with telescopes observing the moon and whatever else is out. And so if you live downtown or you just happen to be downtown, that's one possibility. The following night, we got a couple of events planned. So we're going to be back at Hinton Park in Collierville. And of course, this is our kind of monthly mentoring / observing session. So again, we try to do this once a month. If you have a telescope and you would like help setting it up, learning how to use it, getting some one-on-one experience, hands-on experience, some of our telescope mentors will be at Hinton Park in Collierville. And again, this is by the soccer field off of Fleming Road. We'll send an email out on this. But we do this once a month. Great setup. And so we'll have a moon that night as well. So that's one event. And then the second event, I think I got a slide for this one. I'll show you in a minute. Crosstown Concourse is having an Observe the Moon Night event. They got a big thing going on down there. So anyway, 2 options. If you're in Collierville and you want to come out to Hinton Park, you can go there. And then Crosstown Concourse. So we got an event there as well, both kind of related to International Observe the Moon Night. Did you want to talk about the pinwheel things that we got?
Well, we ordered 100 of them. And so we're going to have some at each location and to give out to, I guess, the families more than individually, because we'd run out in 5 minutes otherwise. But it's kind of cool. I think I spread them around. Did anybody not see that?
All right. Anybody's interested? Mark has got a few of these, so at the break, if you want to take a look, I think we'll be handing them out at the event as well.
Right.
So, all right. Cool. All right. Now,
Are telescopes needed for crosstown?
I don't think so.
Milan is.
No, Milan's bringing a scope out.
We have the brewery has made a formal request, so we'll be near the brewery officially. And I'm still waiting on a reply from Crosstown Arts to see if we could be in front of the main plaza area. There are good sight lines at both locations.
But do you need volunteers?
We will, especially if the main plaza opens up, because the Mid-Autumn Festival is probably going to draw a lot of people.
Mid-Autumn Festival, yeah. So Milan's bringing a scope. I may be joining Milan to help out. So yes, we probably will need a couple of volunteers if people are available for Saturday night. Media may be there, so this is going to be a pretty good crowd, I think. Okay. End of the month, two big events coming up. Our Village Creek Star Party is September the 28th. This is scheduled as semi-annually. So again, it's a big event. And okay, I got slides. Again, let me back up here. So I put together a slide for the Beale Street Landing event. So again, we're going to be doing this once a month. The dates are September 13th. I got an echo. You can turn that off. I'm hearing myself. This is creepy. So here's the Beale Street Landing event. So we start this Saturday or this Friday, and the idea is to do this once a month. So again, this is it's kind of the view. He's got a nice view of the lake looking out toward Arkansas, the Solar Bridge in the background. So that's this Friday. And then Saturday is the event at Crosstown Concourse. Okay, so now this is the official Mid-Autumn Festival that's coming up on the 14th. So this is the event that Milan's going to be at. I probably will attend this one as well. We can get a couple more volunteers. You know, it should be a good crowd for this Saturday. So that's what's coming up this weekend. Now, all right, the 28th, last weekend of the month, is our semi-annual Village Creek Star Party. We haven't done this in a while. We want to slam dunk it this year. This is our semi-annual Star Party. It's at Village Creek State Park in Wynne, Arkansas, about an hour straight west of Memphis. And essentially what we do is, exit 242 is Forest City. If you're interested, we meet around 5:30 for dinner at Delta Q. And then we head up to the Visitor Center a little after 7. And then we have an indoor program. And we do, basically an overview of what we're going to see. How are we doing? We good?
Start to record.
Oh, you're kidding. All right. I'm not going to start over. Hold on. All right, we now join our regularly scheduled program in progress. So about the first 10 minutes of the show we missed. We're talking about our upcoming Village Creek Star Party. We did all the usual preliminaries. I'm glad he thought of it now instead of 1 hour from now. All right, September 28th is our Village Creek Star Party. And we need telescopes for this event. So we've got maybe 4 or 5 right now. We'd like to double that, get to 9 or 10. So if anybody has a telescope and you can bring it out to Village Creek State Park on September 28th, please consider volunteering. So Mark, you can email him. You can also send an email to info@memphisastro.org, and then we should all get that. We'll send an email out with a survey as well, and basically request volunteers. So, and then we send out charts. We have basically an objects list that we'll send out with what we're planning to look at that night. We're trying to add structure to this where you have an indoor program, and then you have a cluster of low power telescope, another one of medium, and then another one of high power. And the idea is you kind of cycle through that and get a chance to see the same object in 3 different telescopes for comparison. In reality, it's kind of like herding cats. Whoever shows up, it's kind of a free for all. So, but it's still a good event and a good opportunity to, to see some good late summer, early fall targets through several different telescopes. So we got about 5 volunteers right now. We need a few more people to volunteer. So we need about 4 or 5 more telescopes. So if you can make it on the 28th, please either reach out to Mark, send us an email at info@memphisastro.org, or just respond to the email that we'll send out requesting volunteers. So big event on September 28th. And of course, all this is weather dependent too. So keep an eye on the forecast. If we're clouded or rained out, then we'll reschedule to a rain date, which is about a month later. Also in February, later this month, if you're interested, the Arkansas Dark Sky Festival. This is the 3rd annual Arkansas Dark Sky Festival. That link has all the information. It's near Bear Creek off of the Buffalo National River. Mylan and I have gone the last year or two, and it's basically, kind of to heighten awareness of light pollution and dark skies. But there's going to be a lot of telescopes there. There's going to be a program there. There's going to be a NASA astronomer there giving a presentation. So pretty good event. Registration, very cheap. You can camp on site, stay off site. So the idea is, 26 and 27, maybe you hit this event, 28 to do Village Creek Star Party and just kind of have a long astronomy weekend. And you get your observing fix in for, it's like astro nicotine. You get your fix in for a few months or whatever. So anyway, consider that. That's later this month, Arkansas Dark Sky Festival. Okay, I want to welcome some new members. If you're here tonight, welcome. If you're not here tonight or you're on Zoom, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I just want to say your name. Ethan Duger, Avery Knowlton, Cynthia Knowlton, Daniel Henning, Dana Watson, Kelly Blumenthal, Joshua Benson. Welcome to the Memphis Astronomical Society. And a reminder, if you're a member, you get access to our newsletter. I didn't update this, did I? Okay. Anyway, check out this month's edition of the Meteorite. And we've got some good information in there, including an article on the now functional MAS all-sky camera. So read that article. Check it out. Does anybody want to say anything about this? I think we're going to have a presentation on this coming up.
Next month,
Next month. All right. So,
aren't we? Still?
I think so.
Jeremy's the.
No, he's not.
If it's up to me, the answer is yes. All right.
That's Freddie.
We got this up and running. It surveys the skies a lot. And it's at our dark sky, our members only dark sky site. We've got an article on it in this month's edition of the Meteorite. Check it out. And make sure you make the October 7 meeting because we're going to have a full presentation on this. So spoiler alert, don't miss it. This is good stuff. All right, a couple of events from last month. Again, we were at Hinton Park. We're going to be there next week. We had an event there on August 9. Had a couple hundred people show up. So quite a turnout. I will never underestimate the person who put this event together again. So you can see we were looking at the moon and very good turnout at Hinton Park. And we did a Burton's observing session for the first time in a while too. 10 people, all new, came out. Very nice night. So had a couple of good observing sessions last month. And reminder also that we've got the MAS.fits meeting coming up on the 12th, this Thursday. So let me just we had a question about this. So basically we have 2 meetings each month. So this is our general Memphis Astronomical Society meeting. So it's open to everybody, whether you're a paying member or you're a visitor, you're welcome to attend this meeting tonight. This is our general Memphis Astronomical Society meeting. The MAS.fits is an astrophotography focus group. They call themselves the MAS.fits. I won't explain why, but basically it focuses exclusively on astrophotography. And it's for members only. And they meet once a month via Zoom. We send the link out. Our past meetings are on YouTube, so you can check that out. If you have an interest in, or you think you have a passion for astrophotography, this is a great opportunity for you. You're going to hear from one of our senior members tonight who's going to be talking about some of the work they're doing with the telescope in Chile. So check that out. Again, this Thursday, September 12th. Okay. And a reminder also, we've got fall elections coming up. Every year there's a transition on the board. So we vote in November, and then we basically make the board official in December. So we have a nominating committee.
We vote in December.
We nominate in November, then we vote in
We
December.
close nominations in
I've been doing this
November.
for how many years, and I still don't get it right. So anyway,
And then vote in December.
we have a nominating committee that's going to go out and draft people or recruit people. We got a few people that are going to be stepping off the board this year. I need a few people to step up, 3 or 4, possibly. So if you are interested in serving on the board, then please consider it. So not a whole lot of extra time. Basically, we just one board meeting a month via Zoom. And if you're interested in running for an officer position, all positions are in play. I will tell you that our VP of observing, after several years, has decided that it's time to take a break. So he will be stepping down. So we need somebody to fill that role. And we need some more help on the outreach side of things as well. So we're definitely in need of some more volunteers. So if you're a brand new member, welcome. And consider possibly serving on the board. So we're going to be soliciting interest as we go. So that's coming up in November, later this year.
Prerequisite, the only requirement for most of these officer positions is that you're breathing.
You're breathing and you attend a board meeting once a month.
Requirements are a bit less.
Yeah. It would be nice to attend a board meeting once in a while too. We need a quorum to vote on things. So the point is, if you're a member, this is an active, experience, other than just showing up at a meeting once in a while. We really need people to, step up and volunteer whatever time they can. I know people are busy and we got a lot of things going. There's a little bit of work involved in this, but it's supposed to be fun. But if you can volunteer your time, one board meeting a month, or like I said, come out to some outreach events, bring your telescope, just do things like that, even if it's just once in a while, once a year. It helps us out tremendously. So anyway, we got that coming up. Consider it. I'll mention this also, Cafe Press. If you want to get your MAS swag, whether it's shirts or cups or golf balls or ball caps, whatever, you can go to this link here and order MAS swag or MAS.fits swag as well. So we got both in the room. So anyway, that's where you get your MAS logo and your MAS.fits logo swag. Next meeting next month will be October the 7th, right back here at Rhodes College. So we are planning, unless you say otherwise. So this one, yeah. Rick and Steve will be running this meeting. I'll have to step out. I'll be absent, unfortunately, but we are planning to meet here unless we tell you otherwise. And then the following month, we've got a professor from University of Mississippi coming. Pretty intriguing talk. So that will be our guest speaker on November the 4th. So mark your calendars for those 2 dates coming up as we get into the fall. Still have a telescope for sale. If anybody's interested, this is a good starter scope. It's a 10-inch Dobsonian. I have this exact scope. Announced this last month. It's still out there. If you're interested, Jory Myers, there's her email address. Reach out to her, make her an offer. And this is probably my most versatile telescope, my 10-inch Dobsonian. So consider it. Okay, a couple other things to mention here. So for those of you who subscribe to Sky and Telescope, interesting article in the September edition, and this is on the Kuiper Belt. And you're kind of seeing here an artist's view of what the sun would look like from the surface of Pluto. And the Kuiper Belt is a region of icy bodies on the outskirts of the solar system, past the orbit of Neptune, otherwise known as trans-Neptunian objects. And it was named after Gerard Kuiper, who was supposedly the first person to propose its existence. Well, as it turns out, he may not have been the first one. There's an individual named Kenneth Edgeworth who proposed its existence a few years earlier. You can see here in this article. He wrote the key sentence: "It may be inferred that the outer region of the solar system beyond the orbits of the planets is occupied by a very large number of comparatively small bodies. It is not unreasonable to suppose that this outer region is now occupied by a large number of comparatively small clusters, and that it is in fact a vast reservoir of potential comets. From time to time, one of these clusters is displaced from its position, enters the inner regions of the solar system, and becomes visible comet." That's where, of course, we get Halley's Comet from. Here's where it gets somewhat interesting. In his 1951 paper, Kuiper repeatedly cited Oort's 1950 work, but not that of another scientist who in 1943, again in 1949, had suggested the continued existence of a trans-Neptunian belt. Irish Army officer, engineer, and scientist Kenneth Essex Edgeworth. His relative, Maria Edgeworth, had been in a scientific pedigree. His relative, Maria Edgeworth, had been an early 19th century novelist, and Kenneth Edgeworth himself was the nephew of William Wilson, an astronomer who built the observatory at Dartmouth House with the 12-inch and 24-inch telescopes. I had no idea. This is the nephew of William Wilson. How about that? So, in light of this, and here's his house. Here's Uncle Bill's house right here, Dartmouth Observatory. Kenneth Edgeworth visited his uncle's observatory in the village of Street County, Westmoreland, Ireland. And there it is in the 1800s. So as a result of this finding, it is now proposed that the Kuiper Belt be renamed to the Edgeworth Kuiper Belt, because really it was Kenneth Edgeworth who made the discovery before Gerard Kuiper. Not only that, but Kuiper thought this area was empty of everything except Pluto. So he really didn't propose that it was filled with a bunch of icy bodies out there. The plot thickens.
I'm saying drop the Kuiper altogether.
Hopefully most of you have heard of the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. All right, so this is basically the bread and butter of stellar astronomy. It plots mass and luminosity of stars based on basically every star in the universe. This is the bread and butter of stellar astronomy. Well, 100 years ago, it was the Russell diagram. Who was largely responsible for renaming the Russell diagram? None other than Gerard Kuiper. Kuiper had earned his doctorate in 1933 under Danish astronomer Ejnar Hertzsprung. In 1911, Hertzsprung had plotted color versus apparent magnitude for the stars in the Hyades and Pleiades clusters. German astronomer Hans Rosenberg had made a similar plot of the Pleiades the year before. In 1913, Henry Norris Russell, 2 years later, an astronomer at the Princeton University, constructed a diagram comparing the spectral types and absolute magnitudes of stars. This came to be called the Russell diagram. While attending a party in March 1936 in our Harvard College Observatory, where he had a one-year appointment, Kuiper got into an argument with both Russell and Harvard astronomer Harlow Shapley, who had received his doctorate under Russell. Quote, Kuiper objected to the Russell diagram, insisting that it was more properly the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. He writes in his book, Kuiper later told Hertzsprung and Chandrasekhar that his suggestion annoyed Russell considerably. Kuiper had demanded top billing for Hertzsprung and was astonished when he reported Russell barked back. Quote, Hertzsprung did not make it. Kuiper was furious. The dispute sent him to Harvard's astronomy library, where he documented Hertzsprung's priority. Kuiper later joined Yerkes Observatory, operated by the University of Chicago, which published the Astrophysical Journal. In the late 1940s, under pressure from Kuiper, Chandrasekhar, also at Yerkes, adopted the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram as the journal style, and that's how astronomers worldwide now refer to this cornerstone of stellar astronomy. So isn't it interesting and somewhat ironic that it was Kuiper who was instrumental in getting the Russell diagram renamed to the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, and now we should properly refer to the Kuiper belt as the Edgeworth-Kuiper belt. And Kenneth Edgeworth is none other than the nephew of William Wilson. That is wonderful. See, you learned something new. What connections we have here, huh? And that would make him about 160 years old. Still looks pretty good. Anyway, if you don't know, William Wilson is a longtime member of the Memphis Astronomical Society, and he's been studying the sun every single day, every clear day since 1879 or 1979. Okay. Enough of that. All right. So we're going to take a break eventually, but I'm just going to dive right in because I got a bunch of stuff to cover. So it's always nice to knock a bucket list item off of your bucket list. And we had the opportunity to do that earlier this year. So we're going to talk about that. I'll go through kind of my experience with Brian going to observe to Chile a couple of months ago, and then Brent will talk about some of the work that the MAS.fits group is doing. So kind of the backstory. Brian and I met in 2015. I had just bought Ben Hudgens' 20-inch Dobsonian telescope, and I needed eyepieces for it. And he posted a post in Facebook that he was giving away some eyepieces for free. So I connected with Brian, and the eyepieces were crap. I've never used them. I didn't know anything about eyepieces, but he and I hit it off, and we started hanging out. And as a result, we've had a lot of good experiences over the years observing, both at Burton's and then, just a lot of stories to tell. So, and this is how you learn astronomy. You find somebody who's just a little bit better than you, and you start hanging out with them. And of course, Brian has learned an awful lot from me. Just kidding. Other way around. But anyway, a few years before he and I met, he had actually taken this trip to Chile. And a few years later, he sent me this picture. And I'm not sure if it was out of spite or to inspire me as to what was possible. But I got to tell you, even today, it still hurts to look at this picture because it is magnificent. And of course, you can see the silhouette of Brian here with the Magellanic Clouds in the background during his observing trip in Chile back in 2015. So ever since seeing that, I've always wanted to go, and I just knew it probably would never happen. It would just require a unique set of circumstances in order for this to happen. As it turns out, this past spring, he and I both got hall passes from our significant others at the same time. So my wife goes to Thailand, the first 2 weeks of June every year. And then his wife basically said, if you want to go hang out with Jeremy for a week, go ahead. So we got a week. We got something we got to do. So we're brainstorming ideas. Where do we want to go? And the first obvious choice was the Grand Canyon Star Party because it's the first week of June. Another bucket list item. Now, there's pros and cons to doing that. So how about Bryce? And then, what about the Prude Ranch Star Party? They got something down there in South Texas. I did that a year ago. Maybe Arkansas. And just 4 or 5 different options came that we were discussing. Finally, Brian throws out the idea, why don't we go to Chile? And it's one of those moments where I just jumped on it. It's like, okay, I got to do this. This is it. This may be my last opportunity to go on a trip like this. So I said yes, quick decision. And we start making phone calls and basically booking flights. He reaches out to his source at the observatory down there, or at the lodge down there, and kind of informs me that things are a little looser in Chile. So kind of like a one-line email, we would like to come, is there something available? And the response is something to the effect of, sure, come on, we got you. Well, if I'm going to travel to another continent in another hemisphere where they don't speak my language, I'd like a little bit of confirmation. So you don't necessarily get that because people are busy and things are a little looser. And we even kicked around the idea that he may not like Brian anymore because he went with his wife last time. Wi-Fi was bad. And there were some verbal expressions. So who knows? But anyway, it was anything but a 100% guarantee. So we kind of started making backup plans along the way. Well, long story short, we get a phone call. Brian calls me a couple of weeks later. He says, you're never going to believe this. He emailed me back, and we got confirmation. We got the lodge set. We got the telescope rental. We're going to Chile. So, all right, sounds good to me. So we hop on a plane, fly from Miami to Santiago, and we catch another plane, fly 1,000 miles north to Calama. Again, this is a moment for me because I'm flying in another country. But anyway, it was a good flight. We land in Calama, grab a rental car, and drive about 66 miles into Chile through the deserts. And basically that's where we were, stationed about 2 miles south of San Pedro. But this is kind of where it's located in Chile, the northern part of Chile, very close to, the intersection of those three countries, Paraguay, whatever those three countries are, Bolivia. Yeah. So anyway, very desolate. I mean, it was definitely a magnificent trip, but we were talking, there is nothing out there. So, I mean, Chile, this part of Chile, the Atacama Desert, is the driest place on Earth. And you can see here, it is a barren landscape, similar to the surface of Mars. So we get there, and I'm thinking, let's get into San Pedro. We'll find a McDonald's, maybe a Starbucks, find a nice steakhouse. And we're driving through here. And this is kind of my moment where it's like, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore. This is a different country. This is a different world. Fortunately, there are places where you can get food, but it was definitely a different look. You drive the streets of San Pedro. So, but we did load up and we were able to get a few of the essentials. And it's a mining town. So now we're heading south of San Pedro toward our stay at the Atacama Lodge, where we're going to do an observing. So literally the instructions are head south and take a right at the 2 white tires. A little light on signs in Chile. So we get in there, sun is setting and we're reasonably confident, but we're not 100% confident that our reservations are gonna be there. So turns out when we drive in, one other individual is there and he knocks on our window and he says, "Is one of you Brian Hancock?" Now that can go one of two ways, right? So, "Are you Brian Hancock?" But no, he was actually very gracious. Turns out he's on site. His name is Rajiv. He's a retired math professor from Vancouver. And he was there for about a month doing imaging with a modified Rasa telescope. So he greeted us right away, was very gracious, very accommodating, showed us around the site and showed us to our lodge, and then also showed us the telescope that we were going to be using when we were there. So it's better to rent a 20-inch than to drag a 20-inch down there. So we had access to a 20-inch telescope. And Rajiv was great. He invited us to lunch one day. There's a nice restaurant in San Pedro, as it turns out. So the idea is you observe all night, you sleep until 12 or 1, have lunch, come back, take a nap, and then you're rolling again. You can see our lodge here. It's basically a duplex. I got one side, Brian's got the other. We like each other, but not that much. Inside, it's all right. You get a cement floor, you get a nice little kitchenette area, table, and a refrigerator with some water. And of course, all the health food, the Doritos and the Lays and the cookies and all that stuff. Just, anything to survive. And you can cook too. Well, you can cook. You can cook. It's nice to have protein when you're out observing. So, and they have a nice bathroom, nice shower, and a nice bathtub area. So, it's nice to be able to shower when you're done observing. And it's great when there's running water. So that's even better. So sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. So, but anyway. It was a nice spot. And you can kind of see here the view from the back of the lodge, taking the pre-observing nap. And that's kind of what the back looked like. Again, looking due east out of the back of our lodge. So it really is a desolate beauty in that part of the country, that part of the world, I should say. So, and magnificent skies. So, and you can see some of the telescopes here that are used for the star tours. They have nightly star tours there. People bus in and then they do the star tours. And you can see Brian here revisiting the telescope that was in the image that you saw earlier. So he's returning to the scope that he used 9 years earlier when he was there. And here's another view, again, of the same telescopes that are used for the star tours. There's another shot from in the evening as the sun is starting to set. So, and they also have a bunch of other domes and I guess they're called clamshells on site where they have other telescopes, from around the world. So it's kind of like a telescope farm, if you will, for people who want to access Southern Hemisphere targets, and live in other parts of the world. And this is similar to the telescope that Brent's going to talk about later, where the MAS.fits guys have access to. So, you know, again, you have a barn where the door rolls off at night. You're looking due east, and then south is to your right. So again, you see you have a lot of different scopes there, probably professional as well as amateurs. So
Plane wave mount.
what mount?
Oh, it sure is. It's an L.
Got a plane wave mount.
L 500.
I don't know what's on it, but that ain't cheap.
Nice mount. And there you can see our lodge again, basically looking from the observing field we were setting up as we're getting into dusk. Not a bad setting, pretty rural.
Is that volcano dormant?
I hope so.
You know, I wondered that every night, because my bedroom, literally my bed was facing that volcano. And I got the volcano out the window. I'm thinking, you know, if that thing goes, it's going to be a bad day. Yep.
What's the name of it? I'll look it up for you.
Yeah. I don't think, well, I'm here, so obviously it didn't happen when we were there. So, but yeah, it's a question for sure. All right, you can see Brian setting up. We're looking due south. You go to the south to look at the south. You don't go to the south to look at the north. We can get that here. So this is a
Star.
get to that in a minute. And you can see the sunsets are pretty magnificent in Chile. You can see that picture. And here's Brian the last night that we were there taking a picture of a 1.4 day old waxing crescent moon. Let that rattle around in your skull for a minute. All right, so there it is. Last night we were there. 1.4 day old waxing crescent moon. Can somebody tell me what's unusual about this image?
Upside down.
Not you,
Chris.
anybody else.
It's back.
He's the other way.
There you go. So when the moon waxes in the northern hemisphere, it starts from the right side and goes to the left. In the southern hemisphere, it's the other way around. So this is what our waning crescent moon looks like. Yeah. Everything's backwards and upside down in the south, which is kind of fascinating. And so you can see here after sunset, the bright stars are starting to pop out. We had some wispy clouds first night we were there. Every night after that, it was clear. You can see here some of the bright stars of Crux, and then Alpha and Beta Centauri are coming out. Exclusive southern targets. Fast forward just a few minutes later as it gets dark. And it doesn't take long for the Milky Way to pop out. I mean, it happens pretty quickly. And it is pretty magnificent. So there you can see Crux, and then Alpha and Beta Centauri, and a few other of the southern targets starting to pop out. You look straight west, and you can see, of course, Sirius and Canis Major setting, taking a nosedive off of the western horizon, and there's Canopus. It's fascinating because when I'm in Memphis, I get really excited about seeing Canopus low on the horizon through the trees, maybe 1 or 2 months out of the year. That's a thrill. You go to the southern hemisphere, and you're like, Canopus, no big deal. Whatever, let's move on. But this is quite a shot. All right. So we're looking at a star chart of the southern hemisphere, where that's the South Pole. This is the section of sky. This is the punchline kind of. This is the section of the sky that we don't see in the northern hemisphere, and that's why we travel south. So you can see here Crux, Alpha and Beta Centauri, some of those targets there. Just outside is Omega Centauri, which we get, again, very low on the horizon in the spring months. And then Sirius, Lupus, and then occasionally we get Canopus, but it's pretty rare. So this is the rich part of the Milky Way that we basically traveled, 6,000 miles to see. And so here it is as the sun is setting. So you can see here, we're starting the imaging. Again, we're looking due south. You've got the Large Magellanic Cloud, Small Magellanic Cloud, Canopus over here. All of this is basically new. Here's Crux, Alpha Centauri, here's Omega Centauri up there. And then you can see some of the stars of Scorpius over here. There's M4, there's Antares, and it's time to go to work. So And here you can see here, basically our first target of the night is not even in our own galaxy. So the Magellanic Cloud, the Large Magellanic Cloud, it's an irregular galaxy about 160,000 light years away. And that's where we start the night. Again, this is shortly after sunset. And you can see we're low here looking at the Large Magellanic Cloud. And inside of the Large Magellanic Cloud, of course, is the Tarantula Nebula. And this is a picture that was taken by Alberto's telescope, the telescope that Brent's going to talk about, that the MAS.fits guys are using. So this is one of their images of the Tarantula Nebula. And this is a massive H2 star-forming region. It's a Mission Nebula. It's in the constellation Doradus. It's in the Large Magellanic Cloud, so it's not in our galaxy. It's outside of our galaxy in a satellite galaxy, the Large Magellanic Cloud. 160,000 light years away. It is the largest star-forming region in the local group. So of all the 30 or 40 galaxies that make up the local group, including our Milky Way and Andromeda, the Tarantula Nebula is the largest star-forming region of our cluster of galaxies. And contains some of the most massive stars that we know of in the universe. So again, referencing Sky and Telescope, this is August. They did an article, August of this past year, on the most massive stars. And they talked about the Tarantula Nebula. Quote, "It is so huge that if it were located where the Orion Nebula is, some 1,500 light years from Earth, it would have an angular size of about 20 degrees, about the diagonal size of the Great Square of Pegasus." So imagine taking Orion's nebula and blowing it up to the size of the Great Square in Pegasus, and that's what the Tarantula Nebula would look like if it were as close to Earth, 1,500 light years, as M42 is. That's pretty amazing. When the Gemini South telescope in Chile sets its sight on the middle of the Tarantula Nebula in 2021, it was able to resolve stars in the massive cluster at its center, R136. A star within this cluster, R136A1, is the most massive star yet discovered. Various studies peg it at anywhere from 200 to more than 300 times the mass of our sun. By comparison, Betelgeuse is about 15 to 18 solar masses. So imagine a star that's 15 to 20 times more massive than Betelgeuse. And that's what the Tarantula Nebula contains. Those are some massive stars. So that's target number one, Tarantula Nebula. That would have been worth the trip right there. All right, here's another shot later in the evening. Again, same part of the sky. And of course, I got to show this to Hurt Rick. We were able to see the Omega Centauri, not low on the horizon, but closer to the zenith. And here's another shot taken from Alberto's telescope, again, that the MAS.fits guys are using. This is the largest globular cluster that we know of in the Milky Way. It contains about 10 million stars, 4 million solar masses. It's about 11.5 billion years old. So these are really old stars. And we think that this globular cluster is actually the nucleus of a galaxy that interacted gravitationally with the Milky Way and got its butt kicked all those years ago, and this is what's left. So it didn't originate in the core of our galaxy. It's the remnants of galactic cannibalism, if you will. So pretty fascinating. But yeah, Omega Centauri, of course, is one that we love. So seeing it high on the horizon, we had to text Rick when we were there. It just kind of felt good to just take that knife and just stick it in his back and just real slow. Seeing Omega Centauri.
I'm still jealous.
Still seeing Omega Centauri at the zenith. So yeah, that was good. All right, Alpha Centauri.
Hey, I got to go to Mexico for the solar eclipse.
Here we-
You did.
Here we go. Astro trash talking, right? I thought he was going to say, I saw it through the 30-inch at French camp, so
I did that
don't mess
too.
don't mess with me, which is true, right? Anyway. All right, Alpha Centauri is the closest star to Earth. It's only 4.3 light years away. I've never seen it through a telescope before. This is actually kind of a highlight for me. Now, we didn't take this picture. I snagged this one from Cloudy Nights, and it was actually taken in Ho Chi Minh City. But this is basically what you see when you look through the eyepiece of a telescope at Alpha Centauri. You see two blazing yellow dots. And for comparison, the larger one is called Rigel Centaurus, and it's a little bit bigger than our sun. Here's our sun. So the larger Alpha Centauri A is just a little bit bigger, and then Ptolemy Alpha Centauri B is just a little bit smaller. So if you can imagine looking at this, you're looking at one star a little bit bigger than our sun, one star a little bit smaller than our sun, but basically two sun-like stars right next door. But again, I had this unique moment to just look through that eyepiece and stare at this for a second and try to imagine, because we throw these distances out there, millions of light years, thousands of light years. We kind of throw this stuff out there kind of nonchalantly, but my brain can't really process what that means. So I'm looking at this. I'm like, this is the nearest star. It's right next door. We've simulated this. We have the Voyage solar system model at the University of Memphis, where we've taken our solar system, scaled it down 10 billion times. Our 850,000 mile wide sun, about the size of a grapefruit, 4 inches across. And then Pluto is a half a mile at the end of campus. On that scale, Alpha Centauri would be located in like Cheyenne, Wyoming. Now we simulate the speed of a photon, which is about the speed that an ant crawls along the ground. And that's the fastest anything can travel in the universe. The fastest vehicle that I think that we've built so far is the New Horizons spacecraft, give or take.
Right.
And of course, that's the one that went to Pluto. It took Apollo astronauts 3 days to get to the moon. New Horizons did it in 9 hours. And even at that incredible speed, several times faster than a rifle bullet, it took 9.5 years to reach Pluto. To get to Alpha Centauri, the nearest star, it would take 73,000 years to get there. So you sit there and you try to comprehend that. The fastest vehicle that we've made so far, it would still take the better part of 100,000 years to get to Alpha Centauri. My mind can somewhat comprehend that. And you just sort of appreciate how big and how vast. And I'm looking at the star. It's like, this is right next door. It's still impossibly far away. Anyway, the Eta Carinae Nebula is also a very popular southern target. Again, this is another one from Alberto's telescope that Brent's going to talk about. This is a large complex of light and dark nebulosity, 8,500 light years away, 4 times larger than the Orion Nebula. And it contains some of the most massive and luminous stars in our galaxy, including several O-type and Wolf-Rayet 8 stars. If you remember the James Webb Space Telescope a couple of years ago when it released its first 5 images, the cosmic cliffs, I didn't include that in its presentation, but basically the cosmic cliffs is a part of the Eta Carinae Nebula. And when you look at it through the eyepiece of a telescope, you see these very distinct dark lines. So it's a very easy target to find, and it's just magnificent. So it was pretty cool. Centaurus A, we do get this one occasionally, kind of like Omega Centauri. Very massive radio galaxy, and it's what's called a BL Lacerti object, which means it has a very active galactic nucleus, which is a very massive, supermassive black hole that's accreting matter, and it's just a very powerful galaxy. So we think it formed as a result of the merger of a spiral and an elliptical galaxy. X-ray jets thousands of light years long, radio jets over 1 million light years long. It's one of the most extensively studied objects in the southern skies. And again, when you look at it through the eyepiece of a telescope, you see a very distinct circular blob and then the dust lane going across the galaxy. So it really is a very visually appealing target. But Centaurus A, magnificent. Okay, so how many of you have heard of Polaris? Hopefully all of you. What bragging rights do we have in the north that they don't have in the south? Truthful. Not many, but an easily findable or recognizable pole star might be one of them. Turns out there's more or less a southern pole star as well. So I took my pocket atlas along, and you'd have to be Paul Bunyan to fit this thing in your pocket because it's pretty big. But anyway, if you go to page 50, you'll see the chart of the southern hemisphere. You can see up here, here's Crux, Alpha and Beta Centauri. So how do you find the South Pole star, which is called Sigma Octantis, very faint star? Turns out you start off with Crux, and you drop down to Musca, which is this constellation here, and then you drop down to this, what is it? Parallelogram? It's not a parallel, what's the geometric? It's not a rhombus. I think it's a parallelogram. How bad is my geometry? It's kind of, well, basically it's a trapezoid.
It's not a trapezoid, yeah. It's
Yeah,
not
it's
a
kind of a
parallel.
trapezoid. Anyway, 4 stars that look like a squished rectangle. That's chameleon. And then the pointer stars arc over to here. And then you find Delta Octantis. All right? Now from here, it gets really tricky because you basically got to star hop your way down and then more or less kind of guess sort of where Sigma Octantis is. So this was an exercise to actually go through this. And so let's actually do it. So again, same picture I showed you before. You can see Sirius, you can see Canopus, and you can see I'm looking at the Magellanic Cloud. Here's Rigel Centaurus. So let's break this down. So there's Crux. You can see it at the very top of this image. And there's the, so that's Crux. And there's the Coalsack Nebula, it's that dark nebula off of Crux. All right, anybody see where Musca is? You got to drop down. There's Musca. You can find this visually, all right? Now, where's Chameleon? See where Chameleon is? So you can see Chameleon right there. All right, so I can get there. And now I use the pointer stars to get me over to Apis. And then I arc over to Delta Octantis. This actually isn't too hard, famous last words, but I was able to get there. All right, now, where do we go from here? All right, so now I got to drop down, and I'm going to find Beta Octantis. Well, actually, before I do that, there's Omega Octantis. You just go down a little bit, and I know that's Omega Octantis because there's a star right there. So anyway, I'm going to add Omega Octantis now. I got to get to Sigma Octantis. So I drop down to Beta Octantis. Now I go back up, again, about a third of the way down from Delta Octantis is roughly where I got to be to find the Chi star, which is right about there. And then there is Sigma Octantis. So that is more or less the South Pole star. And if it's not, none of you are going to know anyway, and it doesn't matter. If it is, and you want to prove me wrong, you're going to do the exercise, you're going to come back and say you're full of it, and then I've inspired you to actually do something and learn something. So with that, that is
You know, the
Sigma Octantis.
purpose of a pole star is to be easy to find.
So anyway, that is basically the Polaris in the southern hemisphere. And of course, you can see how this works as you go through the night. Whoop. All right, so you can see what observing. You can see the sky rotates clockwise in the southern hemisphere about Sigma Octantis. Now it drifts a little bit because it's not exactly on the South Pole. It's off by a little bit. And you can see, you know, we take a break once in a while, we come back. We can see the Milky Way turning. So in the southern hemisphere, when you look due south, the sky turns clockwise. And in the north, it sweeps. In the north, when you look at Polaris, it sweeps, it rotates counterclockwise, and then it sweeps to the south. So you got to explain that to a flat earther, okay? I just proved that the Earth is a sphere, because when you're in the south, it rotates clockwise. When you're in the north, it rotates counterclockwise. But anyway, so that's kind of what it does. All right, so here's another shot of the Magellanic Clouds as the night, again, we get into the late night hours here. You can see the Milky Way turning. There's Alpha Centauri, there's Crux, there's Eta Carinae. Here comes Omega Centauri. And you can see the large Magellanic Cloud just kind of skirting the horizon here, looking due south. And you can see the small Magellanic Cloud now beginning to rise as we get into the late hours. What's that?
The time interval between frames.
1 second between frames, 600 frames, 20-second exposures each. So, yep. Yep, 21 seconds. Yeah, 21 seconds. Yeah, gotcha. So that there you can see several hours of the sky turning as you're looking due south. All right, so then with the small Magellanic Cloud higher up, we get a shot to look at some targets there. You can see Brian here looking at the small Magellanic Cloud. There's a very interesting target right there. It's 47 Tucanae. We zoom in, again, this is not one of ours. This is an ESO image. You can see the small Magellanic Cloud. That's a good globular too. I forget the NGC, what is it, 336 or something like that? I don't remember. Anyway, that's 47 Tucanae right there. And you can see it right there, just on the outskirts of the small Magellanic Cloud. This is a nice globular, very nice. In fact, it's the second brightest after Omega Centauri. 10,000 stars are telescopically visible. Adjacent to the Magellanic Cloud, about 15,000 light years away, is a very dense core. And there's a Shapley-Sawyer concentration. This is a great presentation topic, by the way, if somebody wants to do this. You know, research the different classifications of globular clusters. But this is a very nice, tight core. And it's a cool little globular to look at because you see the compact center where there's stars, and then it gets very diffuse as you're looking out. So very rich target. Also topic of a lot of research. So 47 Tucanae, really cool. This one I didn't know about, and I still don't know a whole lot about, but we did see it. It's in the constellation Grus, again, another southern sky target. And you basically get 4 galaxies for the price of 1. And including NGC 7582, which is a Type 2 Seyfert galaxy, which is has an extremely massive, supermassive black hole at the center. Very bright because it's accreting matter. So it's kind of like a quasar. So it's one of these high energy galaxies. And all these galaxies are gravitationally interacting. So I don't know much about these two. I'm still researching it. But it was, yeah, to see 4 fuzzy patches like that, and to know that they're face-on spiral galaxies in an eyepiece is pretty cool. And we saw this too. This is in the Small Magellanic Cloud. Now, I don't know a whole lot about this one, so I'm gonna have to put my guys on the spot here. But I do remember seeing it in the Magellanic Cloud. You're basically looking at open clusters. I think they're open clusters in another galaxy, and they look like little fuzzy patches. So do you know if are they open clusters or nebulae?
Combination.
It's a combination?
It's a combination of
But you can just move the telescope around. You can see fuzzy patch after fuzzy patch. Is it called the Magnificent Seven?
The nebulas, the little kind of bluish looking spots, there's 7 of them, so that's why that little patch is called that.
I got it. So it's the blue nebulae. These are the Magnificent Seven. Okay, I got to research this a little bit more. But again, you're looking at nebula and clusters in another galaxy. And this again is another image taken by Alberto's telescope in Chile. So fascinating. It's one thing to see a cluster or a nebula. It's another thing to see it in another galaxy. That's pretty incredible. All right, you can see the Milky Way rising here. Here's Scorpius. You can see the core of the Milky Way and some of the stars of Sagittarius. So you're looking due east early in the evening. Of course, that's our lodge there as the Milky Way is rising, time lapse. And if we look over the horizon here, you can actually start to see, where is it? So there comes Altair as it's rising. If I look a little bit further north, I can see the summer triangle. So there's Altair, there's Vega, and then here comes Deneb over the mountains as Cygnus is rising upside down. So I thought that was pretty cool. Later in the evening, you can see the telescopes, Small Magellanic Cloud. Again, we're getting at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Another shot here of the clamshells. And then the Small Magellanic Cloud. Here are the Magellanic Clouds in reference to our lodge later in the evening.
Jeremy?
Yes.
What was your latitude where you were?
What was our latitude?
I have no idea.
I think it's the equivalent of,
It looked like 20-ish when I saw
yeah,
it, like 20 to 25.
I think it's the equivalent of Miami, Florida, if I'm not mistaken. Whatever that is. That's a good question. Yeah, what was our latitude? I know it was northern Chile.
It looks like it's less than 35. Because
Yeah.
the rise angle of the stars is different than Memphis.
Yeah, it was near the Tropic of Capricorn, so similar to where Miami would be. I'm gonna look that up when I get home. It's a good question. All right. What is it? Piastis Resistance, whatever. Zodiacal light. So this is a chart from Wikipedia. What you're looking at here is a composite of 2 different parts of the globe. All right. So here is from Chile, and this is from Hawaii, and then basically the entire sky in between. It's a composite panorama of the entire sky taken from the platforms of Gemini South in Chile left and Gemini North in Hawaii right. What you're looking at here is the zodiacal band and the zodiacal light. What is that? It is sunlight scattering off interplanetary dust. So just like planets and moons light up when sunlight reflects off of them, so do little dust particles in the plane, the ecliptic plane of our solar system. And you can actually see that if you're in dark enough skies. And it can be easily mistaken for light pollution, similar to if we're at Burton's and we're looking toward Memphis and we see a light dome.
That's what I thought the Milky Way was the first time I saw it.
So anyway, interestingly enough, if you look in the, how do you know you're looking at the zodiacal band? You should see either a planet or a zodiac constellation. You can see them all here: Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Scorpius, Sagittarius. So if you see a planet in that band or a zodiac constellation, you know you may be looking at the zodiacal light. And actually Mars pukes off a lot of dust. So I didn't realize that easy. It's kind of the pig pen of our solar system. So it contributes a lot of dust to the disk of our solar system. So here's an image here of us, again, looking due west earlier in the evening. You can see Canopus and you can see Sirius right here. Of course, this is the Milky Way. Now, what made this tricky is we've got San Pedro to the north. So, but Brian astutely kind of looked at that and he thought, you know what? I think we're looking at the zodiacal light. And this was a little bit of a controversy, but we kind of got it figured out. So now this picture is out of focus, but here's a picture Brian took with his fisheye lens. You can see it much more clearly here. Here's the Milky Way. Here is the light dome from San Pedro, a little bit further north. And then here is the zodiacal light. How do I know I'm looking at the zodiacal light? Because M44, the beehive cluster, is in that band. It's in Cancer. There it is right there. So that was pretty cool. Look the other way later in the evening. This is about an hour before sunrise, 4 o'clock in the morning, give or take. Again, I'm looking due east. And this is where I'm thinking to myself, what objects do we have that they don't have in the south? We got to have something. I thought, okay, the Andromeda Galaxy, pretty popular target. And here it is rising. It's kind of like flipping the bird at me, like, nope, we got that too. So, but anyway, if you look at the volcano, you can see a light cone coming up here. And it was very distinct. It looked like there was a city with a light dome on the horizon. But when I looked at it a few hours earlier, it was pitch black. So, and I can see Mars and Saturn, which are obviously in the ecliptic of our solar system. So we're seeing the zodiacal light again, looking due east, about an hour before sunrise. So that was pretty cool to see that. Here you can see a shot of Scorpius setting, taking a nosedive into the western horizon. And here we are again, late evening, just before astro twilight. You can see Scorpius here, taking a dive bomb into the western horizon as the Milky Way is starting to set. And we're starting to get to astro twilight now as we go, and you'll see the sky and the landscape starting to change. I'm just kind of gawking. We did a lot of gawking on this trip, just looking at the Milky Way. You can see here it's starting to get light. Landscape is lighting up and the sky is starting to fade, and then the Milky Way just kind of fades away as it gets light. So this is as it's getting light in the dawn hours. And of course, the sunrises in Chile are pretty spectacular too. So you can see it here coming up over the volcano.
I think you're safe on the eruptions. The last one was about 13,000 years ago. So.
Oh, it was, okay. Well, in geological time, that's like the blink of an eye. So shortly after sunrise, Jupiter rises right here. You can see it just coming up over the cone. And then we had a picture of this. If you look due south, there's a bright orb in the sky. Like, what is that star? And Brian looks it up and turns out it's Canopus. Canopus sets and then makes a comeback in the early dawn hours. That's just creepy to me. So Brian had a picture of it, but he dropped his hard drive and lost all his data. So that's too bad. Yeah, that hurt.
I didn't lose everything.
Didn't lose everything. We had some in here. So anyway, I'll wrap up with this. We did do a little sightseeing. There's a place called Valles de la Luna, literally the Valley of the Moon. Very desolate. And you can imagine a time about 3 or 4 billion years into the future when the sun gets hot enough to boil away the oceans and leave salt deposits. That's kind of what this would look like, maybe. So it was definitely desolate, magnificent desolation. It was quite a trip. Sky and telescope again, October. If you're interested in doing a southern hemisphere observing trip, they have a pretty interesting article. And of course, here you can see Crux again, Coalsack Nebula. In this article, they talk about the 7 or 8 people who made southern discoveries of southern celestial objects. And then he lists the 60 finest deep south objects to look at for observing. So this would be a nice list to have if you go to the south and ever doing some observing down there. It just means we got to book another trip. So, but anyway, it's anything from clusters to nebula to just whatever. So yeah, pretty interesting. So anyway, that's my part of the presentation. Anybody have any questions, comments, anything like that? Brian is here in the audience, by the way. So he was kind of the mastermind behind this trip. So everybody give my brother, my astro brother, Brian, a hand.
The time lapses are neat.
Yeah, they're pretty cool to
Really cool.
see how the sky moves.
Especially with the cars coming down the mountain highway.
Yeah, that was a nuisance actually, because we had several headlights flashing on us throughout the night, so
Still.
it was pretty cool. So, okay, we're gonna take about a 5-minute break. Don't nobody go nowhere. Yeah,
Now, when you were observing, you did mainly observing, right?
yeah.
When you were observing like the Magellan clouds, and did you see colors? Did they stand out better in the southern hemisphere?
No, it was still gray.
It was grayish.
We were under Bortle 2 skies, so we still had some light domes and stuff. These were not the best skies I'd ever seen. So in terms of darkness, the best skies I'd ever seen were still Okie-Tex in the western panhandle of Oklahoma. Yeah, is there a question? No? Zoom, anybody? You guys still there? Anybody have any other questions?
I'll just bring up one thing. You know, we observed comet Zhejiang Shan.
Yeah.
That's really hard comet to say there. And at the end of this month, you know, it's going to be our first opportunity to see it. So everybody,
I was going to ask you how you pronounce that. It starts with a T, but what is it?
Zhejiang Shan.
Tajin Shun? Tajin Shun. Is the
Yeah.
T silent, or is it turned into something else? It's a Chinese pronunciation, isn't it?
Yeah, you just imagine like Z, like you know, yeah, a bunch of Z's,
Uh-huh.
and then Gene, Gene, and then for the
It's a
end,
Gene
put
Shun.
TION. So
Yeah.
that's close enough. That's a good approximation. But anyway, you know, we observed that comet, and I mean, you know, it had the tail and everything. It was just like looking at a little tadpole in the eyepiece.
Yeah.
And it was in Virgo.
Yep.
And but at the end of this month, you know, 26th, 27th, 28th, you know, it's going to be an annoying comet. It's going to be
Low on the horizon, but it could
very
reach
low
as
on the
high
horizon.
as,
You need a really good
yeah.
view of the east, you know, down to the horizon to see it. But yeah, at the end of this month, it'll be in the morning sky before it flips over to the evening sky.
Yep. We'll maybe talk more about that as we get into October, but yeah, they'll be mid to late October when that's visible. Could get as high as 5th magnitude, but again, low on the horizon. So, okay, 5-minute break. We'll load Brent up, and then let's do the second part of the program. Everybody's attention. We're going to go ahead and start the second half of our program. So I get everybody to sit down, take your seats.
Shut
And,
up.
yeah. I'm not gonna be that rude. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and start the second half. So you just saw the trip to Chile. Brent is a member of the MAS.fits, and I do want to just make one mention that recently the MAS.fits group, the Astrophotography Focus Group, has crossed over 100 members. So that is some amazing growth in just the last couple of years. So, and Brent is one of the leaders of that group. And he's going to talk about the project, the telescope that they got in Chile. So, Brent, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. So I'm real excited to be here. My name's Brent Ellis. So I've been doing astrophotography now for about 6 years. And again, this group and the MAS.fits group has been such a massive asset to learn from having never even looked through a telescope once in my entire life 6 years ago to now doing what I'm doing today. So I can't thank this group enough and the MAS.fits group. And if you're interested in it, make sure to get involved over there for sure.
I thought you were going to blame us.
But, well, yeah, I guess I can do that too. You have cost me a lot of money as well. So there's that. But so this isn't a presentation on doing remote astrophotography. There's a lot of that out there, but this is a unique opportunity that we got quite by happenstance with Jeremy and Brian, some of the connections that they made in Chile. So we'll talk about kind of what we have going on there. So while they were planning their trip and activities, they ran across a gentleman named Alberto Nardin. He runs a company called Llama Stargazing. And if you do get a chance to go out there to Chile, please take advantage of his service. They'll take you out, they'll look at stars, you'll see all kinds of cool stuff and so on. But he was working on setting up a telescope and getting started out there. And he was able to set his stuff out at one of those telescope farms that gives you access to that telescope remotely. But he was looking for some assistance. How do I get started? What do I do? How do I use it? How do I plan for other people to potentially take advantage of it? And that's where Brian and Jeremy were able to kind of direct him our way to MAS.fits. Meryl, Steve, myself, Brian, a few others, kind of working together to say, okay, how do we take this thing and operationalize it? So he was looking for help. How do we set it up? How do we configure it? How do we troubleshoot it? How do we validate that it works? Can we give him some recommendations on how to use it and maybe some equipment that might help things work a little bit better? So he was looking for a lot of these things from us. And then kind of lastly, he also wanted to give us the opportunity to just enjoy it and use it, which was a very exciting thing. You can go buy telescope time at telescopes around the world, but he's kind of giving us some free access here to his scope while we help him out accomplish these things. We got access in July, and we've had access. He's going to be taking it down where it is and moving it somewhere else. So we've had about 2 months of access and a lot of data capture with it, which I'll go into. So this is what the setup looks like and the equipment that we had access to. We had an Explorer Scientific 102 refractor. So it's a focal length of about 700 millimeter. We also had a William Optics guide scope. He was using an Ioptron GEM 28 tracking mount with an automatic focuser, which was not quite working well when we got started. That one gave us a lot of pain, but I think we got it to a good spot. A ZWO 183 one-shot color camera. I'll talk about that, but again, a lot of us might use mono camera for imaging. He has a one-shot color camera, which means one picture and you're getting that true color. And he had a pier that was mounted in Capiopo, Chile. So this is about 8 hours south of where Jeremy and Brian were, about 8 hours north of Santiago. And again, approximately Bortle 2 skies. So, there's opportunity to get better, not much opportunity. It is significantly better than it is here. And then he's running a mini Windows PC. So part of our trick was, okay, if we're going to control this thing, how do we get from here into that mini PC so we can control his equipment? So that site, again, it's in one of these telescope farms. It looks similar to the image that Jeremy showed, but I've got some images here I managed to record. But it's got a roll-on roof, several of the telescopes inside of it, as you can see. And then just in the evening, before it starts getting dark, if it's good enough weather, they'll roll it off. In the morning, they'll roll it right back on again. So real convenient. Again, most of these telescope farms are going to have something like this. Again, you got to protect that telescope. Unlike now, for me, I'll set up in my driveway. If it's cloudy or rainy, I'm going to drag it right back in the garage. If this is, 1,000 miles away and I don't have access to it, you've got to have some kind of weather control, and these roll-off roofs are how they do that. So it's kind of cool to see that in action. It's another thing you have to consider with remote astrophotography because, again, we don't have access to control the roof. So there were a couple nights where they would close it up because of cloudy weather, and then maybe it got clear again around midnight here, where I might have liked to get on and start imaging, but if they didn't open the roof, tough luck. We were able to see in the camera, so this is a quick image over here on this side. If I give a command to slew, we're able to see inside of that telescope farm, and I can validate, okay, yep, the mount is moving where we want it to move. So you can see there's all different kinds of setup, but quick visual way to actually see, yeah, things are moving when we want them to. So several challenges before we start talking about the results. We had a lot of challenges to get started with. The first one, like I said, was getting access to that computer. Little technical for a second, but we did set up a secure Windows VM hosted in Azure so that we could establish one point of connection to Alberto's computer. We had several people that wanted to get access. What we didn't really need is, if we got 10 people that wanted to try it, we got to figure out how to get 10 people connected to his machine down in Chile. So we built one place that we could control, and then we can grant access to individuals that needed access to do that. Additionally, we had to think about scheduling access to this thing. So this is Alberto's telescope. If he wants to use it, we want him to use it. So we did end up setting up a shared Google Calendar where if Alberto wanted to take control over it for a few hours a night, he can go block that time off. And then we could also coordinate. If I wanted it for the night to do imaging, I could go block that day off. So this was a way to make sure that we weren't really stepping on each other's toes. We as well did a bit of training and approval. So again, this is still very expensive equipment. We want to make sure that the people who are getting access to this understood what they're doing when they go in to control it. So we did a couple training videos, we did training sessions to make sure before we gave the keys away that people knew how to use the tools that we were using. Some of the challenges, we did need to make sure that the scope was balanced appropriately. We did identify a couple of opportunities to fix that along the way, but this has to be done by somebody on site. So we might identify a problem and say, hey, we think the scope needs to be rebalanced. Well, if that site manager isn't going back out there for 3 days, we got to wait for him to do that. So there were several instances where we did have to wait on a local site manager to do the things that we needed to do. We spent a lot of time configuring and tuning the autofocus, the guiding as well. So that's part of it. We were able to use tools like PhD2 and Ioptron's autofocus sequence to figure out, how do we get those in a good place. Some of it had to be tweaked again by that local site manager. We figured out a few things. If the autofocuser, for example, his focus, it had a setting of 0 for near focus, but it wasn't quite focus, and we needed to technically go negative. But because his setting was at 0, we had to have them reset that so we could go backwards on focus, which the software wouldn't let us do at the time. So just an example of some things we had to help figure out. We did have a couple instances of power failure or loss of access to the actual mount. We had to wait for the site manager to go in and basically power cycle that mount. Pretty frustrating for a few super clear nights, no moon or anything like that. We can access it. We can see octans, the southern North Star. We could see it there, but we can't actually move it and do anything with it. This did help, again, as we're thinking about how we account for this. Alberto ended up buying a remote power switch. So basically from home, now he could go turn it off, turn it back on, and recycle the whole system. I talked about control of the roof. We were dependent on the site manager. They were usually on top of it, but there were a few times where it wasn't cloudy that I wish they would have opened it up because we were all ready to go, but they didn't. One of the bigger challenges that we did have was collecting calibration frames. So for anybody that does astrophotography, you take the picture, but then you take something called calibration frames to get rid of the bad stuff in the picture. I'll show examples of what that looks like in a second. But ultimately what this means is I have to wait for the site manager to go to the site and put either a white t-shirt over the telescope or actually put a cap on the telescope. So we ended up collecting a lot of data, but having no calibration frames to work with it for a couple of weeks. And then once we got that data, we were able to go in and start processing it, which we'll see in a moment. And then the final one was thinking about, okay, we're taking these pictures, they're in Chile. How do I get those pictures off so that then we can actually process them and work with them? And I'll show a picture. We ended up using a cloud sharing service to basically upload those pictures each night, let them just kind of upload and chug away. Then we would download them. We've got them stored away on a MAS.fits server so that our members can actually use the data that we're about to take a look at. So this is kind of the meat of what the project we worked on to try to figure out, okay, how do we solve these things? How do we deal with these things? And if you're doing any kind of remote astrophotography, again, there's way better checklists than this, but these are all the things that we ultimately had to think about to make this thing successful. We talked about the calibration frames. This is why this is important. This is at a site in the middle of Chile, Capiopa. So we had to wait for somebody to go out, and you put the cap on the telescope. And if you take a 2-minute picture with the cap on the telescope, this is what it's going to look like. And this particular camera has something called amp glow. So every single image that we take with that telescope has this buried inside of it. So we take calibration frames to get rid of that amp glow. I can account for it so that basically I don't see it in the final image, but I've got to have this picture first in order to do it. So we had to wait a couple weeks for them to put the lens cap on so we could take these pictures. And at the same time, we take something called flats. This is to help get rid of any of the dust, smudges, fingerprints, whatever might be on that lens. You do this typically by putting like a white t-shirt in front of the scope and put a bright light behind it. And that's going to show you, because again, every single picture we take, you've got this little swooshy thing here, a couple dust motes you can see throughout. We can get rid of that. They don't matter in the final picture, but I have to be able to take those calibration frames. We also, again, we uploaded that data. It was an ASUS cloud drive that we ended up using, so any cloud service with enough storage would have been fine. But essentially what we would do is we would finish an imaging run, and I would have something like NGC 1313 in a folder on Alberto's computer. Every morning, once we were done, we would just drag that folder and let it just chug away and upload for a couple of hours to get all of that data to the cloud. At that point, we can pull it down. I can work with it on my computer here. Steve put it on local servers. So again, ultimately, one of the goals that we wanted out of this is we get to see a lot of southern targets, which we'll go through in a moment, but we also have data now that other people, if you want to get into astrophotography, you want to learn how to process this, we've got a whole collection of now southern sky data that you can get access to, and you can process it yourself and learn the tricks. How do I make this thing look like that thing? So we've got a lot of good data stored up to take advantage of. So, all right. The other piece that we did, this was the camera that Alberto had, one-shot color camera. There are pros and cons to determining what kind of camera you use. I used a color camera for a long time. I switched to a mono camera in the past 2 years because it gives me more control over that color. And you can get a lot better results, but you have to work a lot harder to get those results. As opposed to a one-shot color camera, all I have to do is take one picture and I'm getting the color at that time. It does make it a little bit harder to pull out some of those details. So we'll see some results here that I'm really proud of, but it would be really cool to do the same process again with a mono camera. We determined, since we had multiple people going in and doing imaging, we determined some default settings for everybody to use. So everybody's always taking the same number of exposures, or the same duration. So anytime we were doing a deep space object, we were always taking a 2-minute image. Anytime we're doing a star cluster, we were always doing a 30-second image. We're always using the same gain, which is 120, and we always cooled that camera to -10 degrees Celsius. So again, as an individual imager, I do this with my own camera, but since we had multiple people getting in and using the system, we needed to make sure everybody was kind of following the same process.
Why?
Well, calibration frames was one.
That's what I thought.
That was maybe the main one.
Right.
But also just, I mean, you could deviate on the exposures just because, but the calibration frames was the big one.
We could have easily lost 3 days just getting calibration frames.
Yeah.
And we had clear skies. So.
Yeah, we absolutely did. But if I have and the calibration frames, for those of you that may not do the imaging, if I take a 2-minute picture, I need a corresponding 2-minute dark
right.
to put on top of that to make sure that they balance out. If I take a 2-minute picture and I've only got a 30-second dark, they're not going to balance out. So that amp glow that we saw, I may not be able to fully delete that from my final picture. So that's why we got to think about those things and make sure everybody is imaging kind of in the same ballpark. All right. So we'll talk results. You've seen some of these before. Jeremy included several of these inside of the image, but I'll talk about a few different aspects of it. This one was probably my favorite capture. It's one of the more famous southern targets, but Eta Carinae Nebula. One of the interesting things about this does not fit in the image in the telescope that we took. This is actually a 9-panel mosaic of this image. So what that means is, break this up into just a grid of 9 images. We had to take each of those images, and we took about 18 per panel, and then we processed each one of those, we mashed it all together, and then we finalized it.
In color.
Yes. Yeah, so all of this is in color. I can't imagine if I were doing this with a mono camera. I don't know that I would want to do that. A mono camera, for those of you that haven't used one before, one-shot color, I just take the picture and I'm done. For mono, I need to take a red, green, a blue, and a luminance. So at a minimum.
Yeah.
So my 9 panels just became, what, 36? Check my math on the spot. So the type of camera can dictate the amount of work that you end up doing. But this one, again, it's just a 9-panel image. We put it all together. We're able to process it out. Now, whenever you take an image, it doesn't look like this when you capture it. It's very dull, very dark, and you have to stretch it and process it to really see all of these details. So we do all that work, but Eta Carinae, and Jeremy mentioned this before, it's about 4 times bigger than Orion and actually brighter than Orion. That's an interesting fact to me. It would have been real interesting to see this in person like you all got the opportunity to do. But if you think about it, if you go outside, you can actually see, Orion up there with your eyes, pretty clearly, even from like Collierville, for example, and pretty heavy light pollution. So being able to see something this big and that bright, really jealous of what they can do in the Southern Hemisphere. Tarantula, we saw this as well. This one was a little bit more challenging for us to capture because it was super low on the horizon the entire time that we were imaging it. So we still went after it. One of the challenges with it being so low, you can kind of tell the colors are a little more washed out. That is because it was so low on the horizon. If it were higher, we'd probably have more bright colors like this in that final image. But one of the challenges with it being lower on the horizon. Each of these, and I won't call them out, I've got some details up here. We took 60 2-minute images. So when we're imaging, we're not taking one picture and this is what you end up with. We're taking a lot of pictures throughout the night, and then we do something called stacking to put them together to basically get rid of the noise and get a better picture. So this is just 60 2-minute images stacked together and then processed. For size comparison, this is a single frame as compared to what we showed on Eta Carinae. This was the first image that we took with Alberto's camera. So this is a small part of the Small Magellanic Cloud. It's got a couple, again, of these little nebulas popping that you see throughout. Very noisy image on this one just because we were practicing and still figuring things out. But the very first night I was like, I want to try something in the south that we definitely don't have access to. So I pointed at this and we got this. This one was about 130 frames, but you can see just part of that dwarf galaxy with the nebulas kind of scattered throughout. Omega Centauri, Rick's favorite, a lot of people's favorite. Obviously the brightest star cluster option that we do have. So this one was really cool. If you go look, we did a recording of the MAS.fits meeting maybe 2 months ago. I forget when we did that. But we actually did a live demo of the setup in that meeting. So if you want to go back on YouTube and check that out, this one is really cool because when you go to it in the camera the first time, I mean, it pops out just like this. There's not a whole lot of processing you have to do to this one. It looks just as impressive through the scope as it does when you have a final image processed. Fits perfectly as well in Alberto's scope, so very cool target to go after. We do shorter exposures on the clusters, 30 seconds instead of 2 minutes, because how bright they are in their center. So we can blow out that core and then you end up with some stars on the outside, but a giant white ball in the middle. So shorter exposures allow us to kind of see the different stars we have on the inside. All right, this is one of the processes of that TUC 47, NGC 104. Very interesting. I didn't realize this, but that's the second brightest star cluster that we have access to see. So we saw the images from Brian's pictures where you could see it just above the Magellanic Cloud, but another version of that, and we've got the big cluster, and then there was a little one over here too. So the data's got a nice little image of both of those, or framing for both of those images. Here's another one, Messier 55, the Spectre cluster. So you can see different types of options available. There are so many globular clusters in the south. We honestly could have imaged those the entire time and maybe not caught all of them. All right. This one, I like this one a lot. I don't know that it had a formal name, but NGC 6726. This is a reflection nebula that we got. This one we did 3 panels again, so we take multiple pictures and we kind of stitch them together. But we've got these cool reflection nebulas in here. Because of the dark skies we have in Chile and Bortle 2, we're really able to pull out, you can see all these dust shadows in the image. This is something like if I'm imaging at home in Collierville, Bortle 7 plus, I'm never going to see any of that stuff. I can kind of tell it's there because I don't see stars, but the fact that you can actually see the details of the dust come out, really cool in these darker skies. In this example, again, we took multiple panels, the middle panel up and down here. So we did about 100 captures of those, 100 2-minute shots to stack them together. And then on the outside here, we didn't have as much time. So the 2 outer panels, we did 40 captures of those. So still enough to stitch it together, but we spent more time where the interesting data was, which was in that middle panel. Several galaxies. So this one was 6744, the Pavo galaxy. Again, about 152 captures for this one. A lot of really cool spiral galaxies in the southern hemisphere. And again, all of these, most all of these are ones that like we would never be able to see any of these targets, like Jeremy and Brian were talking about before. So some of these might come up low enough where you might be able to see them for a minute, but you're never really going to be able to image them like we can there. So Pavo Galaxy, NGC 300, this was another spiral galaxy near Sculptor. This one's a cool one, NGC 55. This one's called the String of Pearls Galaxy. Looks a lot like the Sculptor Galaxy for people that have seen that one before, and it's just kind of like if String of Pearls is right here, Sculptor is like right over there in the framing. So about 93 of those. This one was a really tiny one, NGC 1313. This one's called the Topsy-Turvy Galaxy. I like that name. But it's been messed up by some other galaxies from what I've read in the past. So it gives it its real weird kind of broken shape that you've got there. That one's in Virgo supercluster. A lot of nebula options. Some of these might get low for us, so you might be able to see them, but you got a lot of time. This one is a 2-panel mosaic of the Lobster Nebula. Again, a lot of nebulas named for the shape that they generally represent. And you can kind of see a lobster in this one if you're looking at it the right way. So about 80 captures of 2 panels to process them together. This one is the Cat's Paw Nebula. So this is 3 panels stitched together. And this is one that I've imaged here before, but I have a hard time getting a lot of data because it stays so low on the horizon. Again, from the south, these things are way up high zenith for a huge amount of time, so we're able to get a lot more time. But this is a planetary nebula, the Helix Nebula. So really nice one that, again, we're kind of able to do here, but being able to spend more time on it and probably get a better picture from the south is a nice one to have. I think that might be the last one that we have. So again, it was a really exciting experience. He is going to work on moving the scope. We might have access to it again in the future, but we were able to learn a lot about what you have to think about to not only run a remote observatory, but also what you have to think about if you want to use it. And again, we were able to capture a lot of data. We've got some other data that we still haven't processed, but we have a ton of data that's out there for anybody interested in learning how to process the images, or they just want southern targets that they're not going to be able to access. We've got all that available now to us, and we can make it available to members as well. So that's it. So yeah, questions? Yeah, great.
When are you going to have Merrill's telescope set up?
Down south, that's going to be a little bit of a job to get stuff there.
Oh, you can buy it from me.
I can buy time from you.
I'm running it right now.
Excellent. This is very informative. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any other questions?
I got a statement. He's being real modest on this too. I mean, the work he did connecting the computers talking to each other. I don't know anybody else. Yeah.
Good job.
If anybody has followed our Facebook group or is in our Slack channel, this man posts stuff regularly on both, and they'll take your breath away. I mean, some of the solar images he's done too in season 4. Are you kidding me? It's just magnificent. So Brent has just, and he's a smart guy anyway. You can tell the gray hair and the beard, you're getting to guru level. But he has grown by leaps and bounds in this area, and has just added a lot of value to our organization, both technically and aesthetically. So, and I got to give a shout out to Brian too. In fact, why don't you just come up here a minute, Brian? I don't put you on the spot, but Brian has made, for me personally, just an incredible contribution to my growth. And again, find somebody who's better than you, hang out with them, and that's how you grow. And I've had just a lot of sessions over the years with Brian at Burton's, and a lot of late nights after everybody's gone home and we're out there, just, hey, have you seen Thor's helmet? Have you seen Caroline's rose? Have you seen the Horsehead Nebula through a filter? Just those kinds of experiences.
Let's not get too romantic.
No, exactly. Yeah, I understand, but there's been a lot of growth there, so, yeah, I won't tell any more. I was going to tell her you wrote the story, no. This is what happens. When you hang out with people who are better than you, they make you better. So, just a tremendous amount of synergy here. So you can see what's happening with the MAS.fits group. Good job, Rick starts it, Merrill grows it, Steve, and then Keith. I got to give a shout out to Keith too. Saw some of the images in my presentation. It wasn't that long ago, I was abysmally bad at astrophotography. Now I'm just kind of bad. So I can at least go on a trip now and document that. And Keith did a lot to really help me get going. And then Brian also, to kind of get me to the point where I can at least go on a trip, document it, and then kind of show the experience. So if you knew where I was, 4 or 5 months ago, that's a tremendous amount of growth. Nowhere near this guy, long way to go yet, but at least I'm taking the first step. So it's exciting to see that growth and that progress. So anyway, thank you guys. Okay, again, Village Creek on the 28th, if it's clear, make every effort to come out. And then we've got a lot of stuff coming up, so stay tuned to your email. And October 7th, we'll be back here. And we've got the MAS.fits meeting on the 12th of September, if you're interested. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Have a great night.